Hey everyone, welcome back. David in History for the Ages here. So, this is an interesting topic, very important one, the history of the rise of authoritarianism. I'm not going to cover everything about totalitarianism. I have a whole video on that. I'm more focused on why does it happen? And you see this meme here. One of these lions has security, free food, free shelter, free medical care. The other has no guarantees but is truly free. Which one would you rather be? And so one is under an authoritarian rule, so to speak, right? One is taken care of, is controlled, and the other is free. One question I ask my students is, would you rather live on your knees or die standing up? And historically, we oftentimes see people rather live on their knees than die standing up. And when you talk about why authoritarianism happens, I think there's several causes, and I'm going to get to them in a second, but I think that issue of human nature and being willing to be able to take the chance of failing in life in order to be free is one of the core reasons of why it happens. And I definitely want to hear you get your comments and your thoughts on this video as we go through it here. What do you think? Did these ideas I'm sharing make sense? Do you have a different point of view? I'd love to actually hear it. So, there's obviously a ton of examples in history of authoritarianism, right? Ancient Rome, and I'll explain why we traditionally believe authoritarianism begins and then kind of give you some ideas to think about. But ancient Rome, of course, is an example. For a long time, Rome was a republic, and then the republic, which if you read Polybius, the ancient Roman historian, talks about a checks and balance idea of councils and senators and all these various positions, but that eventually breaks down, and then you have a Roman Empire with authoritarian emperors, right? Augustus, Caligula, Nero, and several others, right? French Revolution, of course, at the heels of the French Revolution, you get a guy named Robespierre, very authoritarianism. Napoleon, who is a complex person. I have a really fun video on Napoleon, like everything you need to know about Napoleon in 10 minutes. But yeah, on one hand, Napoleon is this very kind of authoritarian guy. On the other hand, he's this child of the Enlightenment guy. But we have him as an example. And of course, the modern examples, you see Stalin, an image of Stalin here, Hitler, and, you got your Mussolini and your Pol Pots and your Maos and kind of these modern authoritarian figures. So what happens? How do they come to power? And so oftentimes you hear the first point I put on this, right? Economic hardships. And you say, well, the economy is bad, so people do not like bad economies. Somebody comes in, fixes the economy, and when they do that, gives them the authority to rule. That's a small piece of the puzzle, but I think, as I'm going to share with you in a second, too much of an easy out. Political chaos, right? You look again, the Roman Republic, for a long time it was stable, but then they had slave uprisings and they had bad economy, and then they had, of course, the civil wars taking place and political assassinations. And then a man named Augustus, Octavian, then becomes Augustus, comes in and restores stability. He brings what we call the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, this kind of 200-year period of peace. But what he also brings with him is this concept that will become part of Rome of bread and circus. And maybe you've heard that expression before, bread and circus. And basically what that means was, it's amazing how many times I ask my students, have you heard this term before? And they go, no. But bread and circus is you give people food and you give people entertainment, and then you can pretty much do whatever you want. And as long as you're taken care of by the government, you feel okay. And I tell my students, look, you think about it, if you're fed and you're clothed and you're housed and you're educated by the government, are you really free? And also, I tell them, and this is not just something I came up with, people have said this before, any government big enough to give you all those things, to feed you, to clothe you, to house you, to do all that, is also big enough to take it away from you in a snap of a finger, and then you become completely dependent on them. And this is a danger in any society, especially because sooner or later, what happens when you do have an economic hardship and the government says, oh, I don't have money to do all those things for you for free anymore, then people get upset. But I think another issue that allows authoritarianism to rise is human nature, moral failure. What do I mean by that? So, I'll ask my students this. Who do you think commits more crimes, rich people or poor people? And very often people say, oh, no, rich people. Or, I'm sorry, poor people. And then I ask them, who do you think is more likely to do bad things, educated people or uneducated people. And very often they'll go, oh, it's educated people. I'm sorry, they say it's uneducated people. And then I tell them, none of that's true. That actually, just because someone is educated doesn't mean they won't commit crimes, or just because they have money, it doesn't mean they won't commit crimes. There was this study they did. Let me just read to you a little bit here. In 2001, the political scientist Donald Green and Jennifer K. Smith used more data and found that there was actually no relationship between lynchings and economic hardships. Lynchings actually fell during the Great Depression. Another person, Dr. D. Levitt, found that the Ku Klux Klan members were actually better educated than typical Americans. If you look at the people inside of Nazi Germany, these were some of the most educated people out there that yet supported the Nazi regime, the Nazi doctors. So the concept as well, it becomes because people are uneducated or, they don't have money. Do rich people commit crimes? Of course, rich people commit crimes. And the reason I'm mentioning this is very often these authoritarian rulers don't rise because of just economic hardship or just because you have problems. It's because people choose to allow this to happen. And I think this is something that is a reality in terms of, what I tell my students is our moral muscles. We are not born morally good people. Sorry, folks, we're not. Right? Morality is a muscle that needs to be taught and used. I use another example when I talk about World War II. If you've never heard of the Milgram experiment. And the Milgram experiment, if you watch my World War II lectures, you'll see it in there. Basically, they have this guy shocking another person because a guy in a white coat tells him to. The guy's not really being shocked, but the guy doing the shocking doesn't do that. He keeps telling him, shock the guy, and the guy keeps doing it because a guy in a white coat tells him to do it because he's just listening to an authority figure who says, I'll take responsibility if anything happens to this guy being shocked. And they have done so many of these social experiments of people just blindly following orders. What was the thing during World War II? I was just following orders. I saw another show once where they basically had a whole bunch of people in a room and a bell would ring. And one person in the room would get up, and that person was the individual who was part of the experiment. So they would purposely get up when the bell rang. Everybody in the room just sat there, right? But then every time the bell rang, that one person would get up. And slowly, all the other people in the room got up because one person got up because of the bell ring. The bell didn't mean to do anything, but they were just following the crowd. Mob mentality, the tyranny of the majority, all of these things we have seen in history, and it's because of how we are wired. So when people say how authoritarianism rises, yeah, sure, economic hardship, yeah, sure, political chaos. But what I really want people to think about is the choices we make as individuals. Would we rather, again, live on your knees or die standing up? And so many people just find the easy path, the bread and circus path. And then when the time comes when you have to say, oh, we've got a real authoritarian problem, they don't know how to deal with it. So just some thoughts there, right? Again, I have a longer video on totalitarianism that I really encourage people to watch and get into more detail on Stalin and Hitler. But these are some ideas I wanted to share. Feel free to leave your comments. I'd love to hear what you think about all this. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thank you for watching.